In the dim twilight of ancient times, a barren couple in Israel faced the heavens with prayers for a child. Their life in the tribe of Dan was quiet, yet incomplete without the laughter of offspring. As they clung to hope amidst despair, an angelic visitor pierced the ordinary fabric of their day with a divine revelation. The angel, radiant and imposing, appeared before Manoah and his wife with news that would bend the arc of their destinies. "Behold, you will conceive and bear a son," the celestial figure proclaimed, his voice echoing like thunder, yet soothing like a gentle stream. He laid out strict instructions. No razor shall touch the boy's head, for he is to be a Nazirite from birth, destined to deliver Israel from the oppression of the Philistines. The air around them thickened with mystery as the couple digested the gravity of their calling. The woman, wise and perceptive, sensed the weight of the promise and the turbulent path ahead. She shared the news with Manoah, her voice trembling, not just with excitement, but also with a hint of fear. How would they prepare for a child destined to be so extraordinary? As night fell, the prophecy lingered in the air, mingling with the scent of the evening fires and the distant murmur of tribal chants. In their humble abode, Manoah and his wife pondered their future under the canopy of stars, aware that the eyes of history were turning towards them, and a story of epic proportions was beginning to unfold. The news of the divine visitor sent a ripple through the heart of Manoah. Under the canopy of a starlit sky, he paced back and forth, the soft earth beneath his feet reminding him of the grounding promise made. Determined to understand the full magnitude of their task, he urged his wife to recount every detail of the angelic message. With each word, contours of their destiny grew clearer and the shadows of responsibility darker. Manoah, gripped by a blend of awe and anxiety, decided to seek further confirmation and guidance from the divine. He prayed fervently for the visitor's return, for he yearned to navigate this sacred assignment with precision. His prayers, sincere and persistent, pierced the heavens, and like a faithful echo, the angel reappeared, this time to Manoah himself. The encounter was nothing short of supernatural. The angel reiterated the covenant with a solemn tone. "Your son is to be a Nazirite, untouched by wine and unshaven by blade, a vessel of purity and strength." Manoah listened intently, his mind etching every word into the stone of his resolve. As the reality of the divine command settled upon them, Manoah and his wife embarked on the meticulous preparation for their son's arrival. They transformed their home and habits, each action infused with reverence and care. The community watched in quiet speculation as the couple, once ordinary, now seemed enshrined in a mysterious purpose. They prepared a sacred space in their dwelling, where symbols of the Nazirite vow were displayed, a reminder of the holy life their son would lead. They studied the scriptures, seeking wisdom on how to raise a leader, prophesied to challenge the yoke of Philistine tyranny. With each passing day, their anticipation grew, woven with threads of fear and pride, knowing they were the chosen guardians of a future judge and deliverer of Israel. As the boy Samson grew, marked from birth by the Nazirite's vow, he blossomed into a figure of immense strength and striking presence. His hair, never cut, cascaded down his back like a lion's mane, a constant symbol of his covenant with God. His parents watched with a mixture of pride and trepidation, aware that his life was destined for tumultuous feats. One day, in the flush of his young manhood, Samson ventured to Timnah, a town at the edge of Philistine control. There, amidst the market's clamor and the vibrant tapestries that lined the streets, his eyes fell upon a Philistine woman whose beauty struck him like a thunderbolt. Her laughter was a melody that pulled at the deepest fibers of his heart, compelling him towards a fate his parents feared. Driven by a passion that blurred the lines between divine decree and mortal desire, Samson returned home, his mind aflame with determination. "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah," he declared to his parents, his voice a mix of defiance and entreaty. "Now get her for me as my wife." His parents, bewildered and dismayed, tried to sway his heart towards an Israelite bride. "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among our people?" his father pleaded, the worry creasing his brow, deepening. "Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife?" But Samson's resolve was as unyielding as the riddle of his birth. "Get her for me," he insisted. "She's the right one for me." Unknown to them, his choice bore the weight of destiny. For his desire for the Philistine woman was not mere caprice. It was the spark that would ignite the struggle against their oppressors, as ordained from on high. Reluctantly, his parents consented, and together they journeyed to Timnah, crossing into the heart of enemy territory. The air was tense with the scent of upcoming storms, both meteorological and metaphorical, as they approached the gateway to what would become the battleground of Samson's legacy. The wedding preparations in Timnah were marked by a blend of Philistine customs and the subtle, uneasy presence of an Israelite family. As Samson and his parents approached the festivity, the air was thick with the aroma of roasting meats and sweet wines, a stark contrast to the strictures of Samson's Nazirite vows. On the eve of the wedding, as Samson walked through the vineyard surrounding Timnah, a sudden roar shattered the pastoral calm. From the thickets leaped a lion, its eyes aflame with wild fury. The encounter was sudden and ferocious, but Samson, empowered by the Spirit of the Lord, found within himself a fearsome strength. With his bare hands, he tore the beast apart as one might split a young goat. The ferocity of the act, unseen by any other, left him shaken yet unscathed, a profound secret he kept to himself. At the wedding feast, Samson's spirit was as tumultuous as the encounter had been. Seeking to turn his inner turmoil into a challenge, he posed a riddle to the Philistine guests, drawing from his fierce battle. "Out of the eater, something to eat, out of the strong, something sweet." He wagered 30 linen garments and fine outfits, confident in the obscurity of his experience. For 7 days, the feast carried on, and the riddle burned in the minds of the guests. Frustrated and desperate, the Philistines turned to Samson's new wife, pressing her to coax the answer from her husband. Her loyalty torn between her people and her new husband, she wept before Samson, begging him to disclose the riddle's meaning for the sake of her family's safety. Samson, worn down by her persistent pleas and the stakes growing ever higher, finally relented. He whispered the secret of the slain lion and the honey he had later found in its carcass, a symbol of triumph and sweetness born from struggle. Unbeknownst to him, revealing this secret would set a chain of events into motion, entangling him further in the conflicts between his people and the Philistines, steering him towards a destiny fraught with betrayal and war. When the answer to Samson's riddle was revealed at the wedding feast, his fury knew no bounds. The Philistines had won the wager through deceit, propelled by the betrayal of his own bride. "If you had not ploughed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle," he thundered, his voice laced with bitterness and wrath. Fueled by a divine rage and seeking to settle the score, Samson left the feast abruptly. He traveled to Ashkelon, a city steeped in Philistine power. There, he unleashed his wrath, striking down 30 of their men, taking their garments to fulfill the terms of the bet. Each fall of his mighty hands was a declaration of his growing enmity towards the Philistines, his actions casting ripples through the delicate balance of power. Returning to Timnah with the bloodied spoils, Samson threw the garments at the feet of those who had tricked him. His heart was heavy, not just with the weight of his actions, but with the palpable loss of trust in his new wife, who had succumbed to her people's pressure. In a move that was as impulsive as it was pained, Samson turned his back on his wife and Timnah, returning to his father's house in Zorah. The Philistines, shocked by the brutal retribution and fearing further violence, responded with their own form of vengeance. In a cruel twist of fate, they burned Samson's wife and her father's house to the ground, believing this act of severance would quell Samson's fury. Little did they understand the depth of the Nazirites' resolve. The news of the horrific fire reached Samson as he brooded in isolation. The flames that consumed his wife ignited an even fiercer flame within him, a burning resolve for justice or revenge. Swearing that he would not rest until he had his retribution, Samson prepared to wage a war against the Philistines, a conflict that would not only test his divine strength but also his human spirit. The smouldering ruins of betrayal hardened Samson's resolve as he turned his grief into fuel for vengeance. The landscape between Israel and Philistine territories became a chessboard on which his wrath moved decisively. Samson, now a lone figure driven by divine fury, became an avenger walking through the shadow of death, his every step a threat whispered in the wind. The Philistines, fearful of his strength and unpredictable wrath, gathered a force to confront him. They went to Judah, demanding the Israelites deliver Samson into their hands. "Do you not realize he is the cause of our suffering?" they questioned, their voices heavy with the weight of impending conflict. In response, 3,000 men of Judah, reluctant yet compelled by the need to maintain peace, went to the cave of Etam, where Samson was hiding. "Do you not know that the Philistines rule over us? What have you done to us?" They pleaded with Samson, their voices echoing in the cavernous depths. But Samson, with the calm of a storm's eye, replied, "As they did unto me, so have I done unto them." Bound by ropes by his own people, Samson was delivered to the Philistines. Yet, as he approached the Lehi, where the Philistines waited thirsting for revenge, the Spirit of the Lord surged powerfully within him. The ropes that bound his arms became as charred flax, and they dropped from his wrists like broken chains. Seizing the jawbone of a donkey lying sun-bleached by the roadside, Samson wielded it as a weapon of divine wrath. In a whirlwind of motion, he struck down 1,000 Philistines, each blow delivered with the precision of divine justice, turning the jawbone into an unlikely instrument of mass destruction. The ground was sodden with the blood of his enemies, and a great cry went up from their ranks as they fled. After the battle, overcome with exhaustion and the weight of his solitary war, Samson cried out to the Lord, "You have granted this great victory by the hand of your servant, and now must I die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" His plea echoed across the barren landscape. In response, God split the hollow place in Lehi, and water flowed forth. Samson drank, his strength renewed as if infused anew by the waters of divine providence. He named the place En-Hakkore, a testament to the living God who answered him in his distress. As he walked away from the field of bloody Jawbone and scattered Philistine corpses, the legend of Samson grew. He was not just a man, he was a force of nature, an instrument of divine judgment etched into the memory of both friend and foe alike. In the aftermath of his staggering victory at Lehi, Samson's reputation as a divinely empowered warrior echoed through the hills of Judah and the valleys of Philistine territory. But the fire of conflict between Samson and the Philistines was far from quenched. It smoldered with renewed intensity as both sides braced for the inevitable resurgence of hostilities. With the approach of the wheat harvest, a time of celebration and bounty, Samson devised a plan that would strike at the very heart of Philistine prosperity. His anger, still kindled by the betrayal and loss of his wife, sought an outlet that would inflict a grievous blow to the economic backbone of his enemies. Under cover of darkness, Samson ventured into the wilderness, capturing 300 foxes in the lush fields that bordered Philistine towns. With a grim determination, he tied their tails together, pair by pair, and fastened a torch to each makeshift pair. As the first light of dawn tinged the horizon, he released the foxes into the standing grain of the Philistines, into their ripe vineyards and olive groves. The foxes, driven by panic and pain, darted through the fields, leaving a trail of flames in their wake. The fire spread rapidly, consuming not only the grain but also the vineyards and groves, pillars of smoke rising into the sky as a stark testament to Samson's wrath. The economic devastation was immediate and severe, a symbolic act of revenge that mirrored the burning of his own domestic bliss. The Philistines, upon seeing their livelihoods consumed by fire, were quick to ascertain the cause. Their investigation led them to the shocking realization that this act of sabotage was Samson's retribution for the treacherous act that claimed his wife. In a cruel twist of retaliation, they directed their fury toward the tribe of Judah, inflaming the situation further and pushing the cycle of vengeance to new extremes. Samson, now fully embroiled in this escalating conflict, watched from afar as the flames of his making lit up the landscape. His heart, though heavy with the toll of his actions, was unyielding, steeled for the further trials that his divine mission would demand. The scorched earth not only marked the landscape, but also the point of no return in his tumultuous crusade against Philistine domination. The spiraling retribution between Samson and the Philistines reached a new crescendo as the tribes of Judah, caught between divine destiny and political turmoil, sought to pacify the enraged Philistines. The men of Judah, bearing the burden of national security, confronted Samson in a rocky enclave where he had sought solitude, their faces etched with concern and a deep-seated fear of further reprisals. "Samson," they implored, "do you not see that your actions bring the wrath of the Philistines upon us all? We cannot protect you if you continue to defy them so openly. They demand your surrender, and we must comply lest our families suffer for your vendetta." Samson, his countenance like flint against the trials he faced, understood the gravity of their plight. Yet his resolve to fulfill his divine mandate remained unshaken. "Bind me yourselves and deliver me to them," he consented stoically, "but do not harm me yourselves." With heavy hearts, the men of Judah bound Samson with 2 new ropes, treating him with a mix of reverence and trepidation as they led him towards the Philistine encampment. As they approached the boundary where Philistine territory began, a tumultuous crowd gathered, their shouts of triumph filling the air, believing that the capture of Samson would finally bring peace. However, as the Philistine warriors closed in, the Spirit of the Lord surged like a tempest within Samson. The ropes that bound his arms burst as if touched by fire, his strength returning with divine fury. In a blur of motion, Samson found the fresh jawbone of a donkey nearby and wielded it with devastating precision. He struck left and right, his swings both wild and calculated, each impact a thunderous decree of his unyielding spirit. The Philistines fell in heaps, their numbers diminishing rapidly under his relentless assault. With a fierce cry that echoed through the hills, Samson dispatched 1,000 men, his vengeance exacted with the bone still dripping with the evidence of his divine wrath. As the dust settled and the echoes of battle faded, Samson stood alone amidst the carnage, the weight of his solitude heavier than ever. The sun beat down on him, and his throat parched with the heat of battle and prophecy fulfilled. He cried out to the Lord, "You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" In response, God cleaved the hollow place in Lehi, and water flowed forth, reviving Samson's spirit and body. This miraculous provision affirmed his role as the instrument of divine judgment, even as it underscored the isolation and burden of his path. Samson named the place En-Hakkore, a constant reminder of the God who answers in the depths of despair. As he drank, his resolve hardened, prepared for whatever trials his tumultuous destiny would bring next. The cycle of violence and retribution had elevated Samson to a legendary status among both the Israelites and the Philistines. His feats of strength and the stark toll of his vengeance were recounted far and wide, stirring a mixture of awe and dread. As the Philistines licked their wounds, their leaders convened in shadowed halls, desperate for a strategy to subdue this indomitable foe. In this climate of desperation, Delilah entered the scene, a woman of enchanting beauty and sharp intellect, residing in the valley of Sorek. The Philistine rulers, aware of her influence and cunning, approached her with a scheme cloaked in gold and silver. "Entice Samson," they urged, weaving promises of wealth into their plea. "Discover the secret of his strength and you will be richly rewarded." Delilah, moved by the promise of riches and perhaps intrigued by the challenge, accepted their proposition. She welcomed Samson into her home, her demeanor a blend of warmth and mystery. Over time, she sought to unravel the riddle of his strength with soft words and tender nights, her questions laced with feigned innocence and genuine curiosity. "Tell me, my love," Delilah would whisper as they lay under the canopy of stars, "where does your great strength lie? How might you be bound?" But Samson, guarded yet enamored, spun deceptive answers, each more fantastical than the last. He spoke of being bound with fresh bowstrings or new ropes, knowing well the danger that edged closer with each word. Yet, with each failed attempt by the Philistines to subdue him, Delilah's resolve deepened. Her methods grew more insistent, her touches laced with the urgency of her mission. The tension between them thickened, a dance of shadows and whispers, until her persistence wore down his defenses. One night, under the spell of her relentless charm and the vulnerability of true fatigue, Samson revealed the profound secret. "No razor has ever touched my head," he confessed in a hushed tone, burdened by the weight of destiny. "I have been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If my head was shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become weak like any other man." Delilah, her heart heavy with the gravity of her betrayal, yet driven by her own desires and fears, sent word to the Philistine rulers. As Samson slept, his head in her lap, the air thick with betrayal, she summoned a man to shave off the 7 locks of his hair. Stripped of his divine protection, Samson's strength ebbed as quietly as the night deepened, setting the stage for his greatest trial yet. In the quiet hours of the night, as the last lock of Samson's hair fell to the ground, a profound silence enveloped Delilah's chamber. The air, once filled with the intimate whispers and laughter of lovers, now carried a heavy weight, a palpable sense of impending doom. Delilah, her heart conflicted, yet her decision irrevocable, watched as the Philistine soldiers crept into her home with stealth and precision. As dawn broke, the Philistines seized their moment, with Samson's once formidable strength now just a shadow of its former self. They bound him with ease. The shock of betrayal and loss rendered him weak and defenseless, his once piercing eyes now dulled with disbelief and pain. "The Philistines are upon you, Samson," Delilah cried out, her voice a mix of triumph and sorrow. Samson awoke to his new reality, his spiritual and physical blindness merging into a dark abyss. The Philistines, jubilant and merciless, gouged out his eyes, ensuring that the threat he once posed was neutralized. His capture was not just physical, but deeply symbolic, a representation of his fall from divine grace and his succumbing to human frailties. Dragged to Gaza, bound in bronze shackles, Samson was thrown into a prison cell, the stark stone walls a grim contrast to the fields and vineyards where he had once roamed freely. The sound of grinding at the prison mill became his daily rhythm, a monotonous reminder of his failures and the cost of his choices. His once mighty deeds were now whispered tales among his captors, who mocked and jeered at the broken hero. Yet in the depths of despair, a faint spark of hope flickered. Amidst the darkness and humiliation, Samson's hair began to grow again, unnoticed by his captors, a subtle symbol of potential redemption. Each new lock was a quiet testament to the possibility of renewal, suggesting that his covenant with God, though strained, was not entirely severed. As Samson toiled, his thoughts turned inward, reflecting on his journey, his missteps, and the divine purpose he had once embodied so fiercely. The weight of his past actions and their consequences bore down on him, yet the growing strands of his hair whispered promises of strength renewed. Unknown to his captors, the stage was being set for one final act of divine strength, an act that would seal his legacy and fulfill his destiny in a way none could foresee. As the days melded into months, the echoes of Samson's former glory faded into the background of Philistine triumph. Yet, within the dim confines of his prison cell, a subtle transformation unfolded. Each new strand of hair that sprouted atop Samson's head quietly heralded the return of his Nazirite strength, though his spirit remained shackled by the weight of his regrets. Meanwhile, the Philistines, secure in their victory, planned a grand celebration to honor Dagon, their god, attributing their triumph over Samson to his divine favor. The temple of Dagon was adorned with lavish decorations, and the air was thick with the scent of incense and the sound of jubilant music. Leaders, warriors, and citizens gathered in masses, their voices raised in songs of victory, their eyes blind to the quiet resurgence of the very power they believed they had extinguished. As the centerpiece of their festivities, Samson was summoned from his cell, brought forth to entertain and amplify their revelry. Shackled and led by a young servant, he entered the temple, his blind eyes unable to see the sneers of his captors, yet his senses sharpened to the resonance of their mockery and the structural vastness of the space. "Let me feel the pillars on which the temple stands," Samson whispered to the boy guiding him, his voice carrying a mixture of command and supplication. Guided to the central pillars, his hands reached out, touching the cold stone, each movement deliberate, each breath a silent prayer for strength, not just to avenge, but to fulfill his divine mandate one final time. As the Philistines watched, amused by his feeble gestures, Samson's whispered prayers reached the heavens. "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes," he pleaded, his voice barely a murmur amidst the cacophony of celebration. With a deep inhale that seemed to draw the very winds of destiny into his lungs, Samson braced his feet and pushed against the pillars with all the strength that had returned to him. The temple, filled to its brim with his tormentors, began to tremble. The stone groaned under his might, and as he pushed, the pillars gave way, the foundation faltered, and the entire structure began to collapse in a thunderous descent. Screams replaced songs as the temple crumbled, burying Philistine pride and prophecy alike under its ruins. Samson, his final act a testament to the complexity of his calling, perished beneath the rubble. His life, marked by divine power and human frailty, ended in a crescendo of destruction that echoed the tumultuous path he had walked. The death of Samson was a profound, if tragic, fulfillment of his destiny, serving as a stark reminder of the power and consequences of divine anointment. His legacy, woven through the fabric of Israelite history, would be remembered as one of both warning and awe, a narrative of strength, fall, and redemption that would resonate through the ages. In the wake of the temple's catastrophic collapse, a somber stillness settled over the land. The ruin was immense, with the once mighty structure of Dagon reduced to rubble, entombing both the celebrants and their celebrated captive, Samson. As the dust began to settle, the magnitude of the disaster slowly became apparent to both the Philistines and the Israelites. The Philistines, their arrogance turned to ash amid the debris, mourned the loss of their leaders, and many warriors, the shock of such a devastating blow by a single man, even in his death, sent ripples of fear and re-evaluation through their ranks. They had underestimated Samson's resolve and the depth of his divine connection, a mistake that had led to a grievous loss. Among the Israelites, the news of Samson's death spread with a mix of grief and awe. While some lamented the tragic arc of his life, marked by potential and ruin, others saw in his final act a divine assertion of power, a reminder that their God was not to be mocked or underestimated. Families gathered to recount tales of his feats, and though his actions were fraught with moral complexities, they could not deny the courage and sacrifice embedded in his final defiance. In the villages and towns, as the story was told and retold, it morphed into a larger narrative of resistance and divine justice. Samson's life, filled with as much tumult as triumph, became a symbol of the perpetual struggle against oppression. His legacy prompted a renewed scrutiny of the covenant between the Israelites and their God, stirring a collective introspection about destiny, divine will, and human agency. Elders and scribes took it upon themselves to record the events of his life, ensuring that the lessons gleaned from his story would not be lost to future generations. These accounts emphasized the themes of redemption and the double-edged sword of divine gifts, serving as cautionary tales and sources of inspiration. As the years passed, the site of the fallen temple became a place of quiet pilgrimage for some, a place to reflect on the complexities of faith, power, and the human condition. Flowers were occasionally laid among the stones, and prayers were whispered, carrying hopes that the sacrifices of the past would pave the way for a future of greater understanding and fewer conflicts. Samson's story, etched into the collective memory of his people, stood as a stark monument to the potential for both greatness and downfall inherent in human nature. It served as a powerful testament to the idea that even in moments of ultimate destruction, there can be seeds of new beginnings sown in the fertile ground of hard-earned wisdom. Enjoyed the audiobook? Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating content. Your support enables us to continue bringing these rich stories to life. Share this video with friends and family who love epic tales and transformative narratives. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more exciting adventures.